Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
Well, all right. Welcome back into Operation Domination. Don't hope to win, be great, and dominate. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mayday, with a full crew today. We got Adam LaRue and Chase Thornton in the building. There was now 4 in the conference championship games. We'll talk about that with some DFS takes, and also looking ahead to the Shrine Bowl this week, and Senior Bowl coming up a couple of weeks after that. So a little bit of a look ahead into 2026, some of the rookies for this dynasty season, as we always do. As far as the coaching changes go, I know there's a lot going on. Like Mike McDaniel's now the offensive coordinator. John Harbaugh took the Giants job, Stefanski the Atlanta job, and so on and so forth. We will have an episode where we completely break down the coaching changes for you. I just want to wait till those actually all done. You know, there's no point having the hot takes now. We'll go through a comprehensive list. So don't worry, because I've had people talking to me about that already. We'll get to that. That's why Operation Domination is not taking any breaks this season, so we can get you all that information. For now, we do have 4 teams trying to punch their way into the Super Bowl. But this show, I don't really care so much about that. Like that's what I have Chaz Flaherty from Sports Betting Weekly on every week for. We talked about the best bets. We talked about my player props. That dives more into that. This is about trying to win some tournament money, some 50-50, some head-to-heads in DFS. So let's get started with a drink.
Yes, let's get started with a drink. I definitely need something to get me going here after the day that I've had around here. So hey, yeah, there's 4 teams left. Our options are dwindling. They're getting limited. You're going to have to make much smarter decisions if you want to separate yourself from the pack here. But let's jump right into it here. Hey, you know, with 2 games on the slate, it's interesting. We've got, you know, one game that has a little bit of a higher point total, and we've got another game, the other game that has a heavy favorite. Obviously, the Bo Nix news after that dramatic win versus the Bills last week kind of took everybody by surprise. It was a shock. I mean, even the post-game presser, Peyton was done, and he had to come back out and be like, oh yeah, by the way, just learned my guy's got, you know, an injury and he's done for the season. So that really changed things on the line in that New England-Denver game there in the AFC side of things, but New England is the bigger favorite of the 2 games this weekend with a 5.5 point line as of right now. Probably wouldn't have been as close if Bo Nix was playing, but instead we get to deal with Jarrett Stidham. So that kind of limits our options at the quarterback position, because I don't think anybody wants to try and use a backup quarterback in such a situation here. But I'm going to go with the guy on the other side of the field anyway this week. That's right, folks. I'm looking at Drake Maye this week at 6,000. I want to play him at quarterback here, even against that Denver defense here. He's the QB2 in salary for the week. He's the ECR QB2 this week. If you look, you know, the fine folks over at PFF, they actually have him ranked as their number 1 quarterback on the weekend, though, for DFS purposes here. In the playoffs so far, he's been the QB3 overall. He was the QB3 in the regular season here. Hasn't really been quite as accurate in terms of his, you know, his numbers in the postseason as he was in the regular season. Regular season, he was in a 70% pass. He was amazing. Below that in the postseason here, but he still has thrown 4 touchdowns, including 3 last week against a Houston defense that might have been the best pass defense in the entire league this season. So, I mean,
yeah,
you're talking about a guy that, you know, that can throw 3 touchdowns against Houston. I still think he's got what it takes against Denver here. He's second in QB rush yards in this postseason behind only Josh Allen so far. And I honestly think we see another jewel here in Drake Maye's eventual crown. I think that this season has been his coming out party. I think that the New England Patriots fans are rejoicing, or should be rejoicing here, as they've left their QB wasteland, their post Brady QB wasteland behind them. It looks like here, and I know that Denver is a tough defense and they've been tough against quarterbacks, but look back to last week and all the ignore all the crazy drama that surrounded the Buffalo, Bills after that game and with their press conference today. But even with the quote unquote horrific performance that he had last week, Josh Allen was still the overall DraftKings #1 quarterback last week against this Denver defense. Still did throw 3 touchdowns, still did run for 66 yards there. Drake Maye has, we know he's a mobile type quarterback. We know that he's a guy that can sling the rock. I like him at 6,000 this week, so I'll roll with Drake Maye. And I'm going to pair him up this week with Kayshon Boutte. I'm going to make a booty call at 4,500. He is he's wide receiver 7 in terms of salary, but he's the wide receiver 6 in ECR for the week, and he's the wide receiver 8 so far throughout the playoffs here. Last week, 3 catches on 5 targets, 75 yards and a touchdown, had 16.5 DraftKings points. And it was tied for his 3rd best fantasy performance of the entire season. I mean, the guy came alive, when it was needed here. And he's been the leading receiver so far through these 2 postseason games for the New England Patriots. He's 2nd in targets on the team to Stephon Diggs, but he leads that team in interceptions, leads that team in yards receiving, leads that team, most importantly, for what we care about, in fantasy points. And if you take a look at what Denver did last week, they did allow Khalil Shakir to catch 7 balls on 9 targets for 75 yards. Shakir had 14.5 DraftKings points last week, which was wide receiver 4, right behind Kayshon Boutte. There are points to be had against this Denver pass defense. Some might argue that, we're a little scared of the Jarrett Stidham situation. We don't think that necessarily the Patriots may have to throw much. Yeah, I'm still willing to put my money on this New England offense performing when it matters here. I think Boutte is the kind of wide receiver that can give Denver fits. And the nice thing about it, I told you at the very beginning of my talk about him, he's 4,500 this week. He is going to allow you to spend up elsewhere. If you want to spend for Puka Nacua, which I'm going to advocate if you want to do so, he's the top receiver in fantasy. 3rd week in a row, but you can spend for Puka Nacua because it's going to pay off. It always does. If you want to spend for, say, Devontae Adams, if you don't want to spend quite 9,000 on a receiver, but you still want a part of that Rams attack. If you want to spend up for JSN, if you want to spend up anywhere, getting a guy like Kayshon Boutte at 4,500 is going to allow you to do that there. So we're going to pair Maye and we're going to pair Boutte. Now, before I toss it to you guys, Dan and Adam, just to get your thoughts here on this quarterback pairing or any stacks you guys might like, I'm going to start mixing our drink here because I got to shake it up. We're going to call this the Mayday Bulldog. I've made some variations of Colorado Bulldogs on the show here in the past, but being that things aren't necessarily the rosiest in Colorado this week, missing their starting quarterback, and being that I believe in Drake Maye, and being that the Boston area is a heavy Irish area, we're going to call this the Mayday Bulldog. Basically, we're going to make a Colorado Bulldog, but instead of using Kahlua or coffee liqueur, we're going to swap that out for Shanky's Whip. If you're not familiar with the Shanky's Whip, it is whiskey and all things good in life. It tastes like caramel and vanilla and hope. And we're going to swap that for the Kahlua that is normally in a Colorado Bulldog. So a Colorado Bulldog, the way that I like to make them, basically it's 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 mix of the parts here. So I've already got 2 ounces, because I'm making a big one here, 2 ounces of heavy whipping cream in my shaker of ice there. I'm also going to add 2 ounces of vodka, and then 2 ounces again of the Shanky's Whip. And again, Shanky's Whip is a Irish liqueur. It's made with whiskey, but like I said, tastes like caramel and vanilla. So I'm going to add those to my shaker here: vodka, Shanky's Whip, and the whipping cream. And while I shake that up, I'm going to toss it to you guys. Dan, Adam, any thoughts on the Maye Boutte pairing here, or anybody you like maybe better, or that you're also pairing with, with a quarterback here as we look at our DFS cocktail?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm glad that drink tastes like hope, because he just signed an extension to the coach that's pretty much the Mike Tomlin of the NFC. So you're going to need some hope as a Packers fan. Just saying. Getting some playoff wins. But anyway, look, Drake Maye, yes, you have the rushing floor to kind of coincide with the guy who, in my opinion, should be the MVP of the league. I'm not going to argue with that too strongly. But I do have my main lineup centered around Matthew Stafford. And while he's the highest priced quarterback on the board, at $6,300. Still not an overpriced tag. None of the quarterbacks are priced up too high, but he might be a contrarian play as a result to that. People are overreacting to the performance the Seahawks defense had a week ago. And you forget that Matthew Stafford had 457 yards against the Seattle Seahawks the last time they played each other. That game went into overtime. So it wasn't really a big hindrance to him then. And that was with a 59% completion percentage. They just took shot after shot after shot, and we could easily see them do that again. And I was able to pair him up with Colby Parkinson and with Puka Nacua in my lineup, and still have JSN coming back the other way in my lineup too, while paying up for Kenneth Walker, while paying up for Kyron Williams. Yes, I'm heavy on that NFC Conference Championship game. But the reason I was able to do that is because my number one sleeper for the week for DFS is little Jordan Humphrey. I don't believe Bryant's going to play. I don't believe Troy Franklin's going to play. And Jordan Humphrey is $3,400 and could easily catch a touchdown. I'm going to talk about this on the show with Chaz Filardi, but I do not believe, and I want to make sure this gets echoed into both episodes in case people want an opportunity to yell at me and then they get a chance to in the other episode. I do not believe that Jared Stidham is a far cry from Bo Nix. I do not think they're dropping off much at all. Both quarterbacks have to play within the Sean Payton system, can run a little bit, and are going to take the first read option available to them. And if Jordan Humphrey is going to be lined up as the secondary option to Cortland Sutton, which is the way this thing could easily shape up to be, he could easily catch a touchdown here from Jared Stidham. It doesn't scare me off at all. So he's at 3,400, and then I piggyback that off with Marvin Mims at 4,100. I don't know how much Sutton gets to have done because the Patriots are good at taking away that number one wide receiver, Christian Gonzalez. But the other two guys could surprise you with a big play and a touchdown, and if you pay down, you can pay up for everybody else. So that's kind of how I structured my lineup this week. I don't know. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's totally reasonable. Yeah, I'm with you.
Totally reasonable. No, and I agree completely. I have in my note here, I said little Jordan Humphrey could be a sneaky option this week. He's got chemistry with Stidham because of where they both sit on the depth chart for most of the season here. But with the Broncos being that banged up at wide receiver, I agree with you on Stidham's ability vis-a-vis Bo Nix's abilities physically and the way that they can play the game. And yeah, we saw little Jordan Humphrey actually do some damage last week when he got in the game as well. So yeah, no, I like that as well. And yeah, I'm going to talk about a different tight end here in about 20 seconds, but I agree with you that if you want to try your hand at choosing which Los Angeles Rams tight end is going to be the one to score this week, first off, Colby Parkinson is not a terrible bet in that regard. And on paper, tight end versus the Seahawks is the best matchup that's available to anybody this week in terms of, points scored against opposing.
Khan just led the 49ers in receiving.
Exactly.
Wasn't great, but he did.
Exactly. So I have, like I said, I shook up the first part of our Mayday Bulldog here. I've got my cream, my vodka, and my Shanky's Whip. I've got that added to my mug here. And on top of that, while I talk about my running back and my tight end plays, I'm going to add one part of cola. And you guys know by now, I've told you before, I like to add actual and use actual real sugar Coca-Cola because I think it tastes the best. I think it mixes the best. It's how most of these cocktails were originally formed back in the day anyway. So I've added my cola to that Bulldog. We're going to let that marinate a bit while I talk about my play at running back here. Kenneth Walker shouldn't surprise anybody at 6,200. He's the running back 2 in terms of salary, but he's the running back 1 on the week for ECR rankings, and he should be. No Charbonnet equals the 3 Fs. Finally, fantasy freedom for Kenneth Walker. We've been wanting it, hoping for it all season. Actually, since they drafted Charbonnet, I've lamented from the very get-go that it was going to limit Kenneth Walker in terms of what he could do. But the Seahawks run the ball at the second highest rate of any team in the league, and all of that is going to be Kenny's show now. So last week, 19 carries, 116 yards, 3 rush touchdowns. He was 3 for 3 in the pass game for 29 yards. On top of that, scored 38.5 DraftKings points. Not only was he the overall number 1 running back, but he was the overall fantasy player number 1 in terms of DraftKings scoring last weekend. 2 of his top 3 fantasy performances this season also came against these division opponent Los Angeles Rams, including his top 2 receiving performances on the season. It is wheels up for Kenneth Walker. Last week against this same Rams defense, we had, Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift combining for 32 rushes, 112 yards there. They also caught all 4 balls thrown their way for 36 additional yards. Combined, they would have been the running back 3. I really don't see where Velus Jones or Cam Akers or Holani, who they actually talked about activating off of the IR list this week, I don't see where any of the 3 of those guys gets anywhere near the play that Charbonnet has been getting. I think if they want to get themselves to the Super Bowl, they have to go through Kenneth Walker. I don't think they make the same mistake and try and throw it on the goal line or anything like that, like they did in the Super Bowl years ago. So I'm rolling with Kenneth Walker at 6,200. I think everybody else is as well. We've kind of talked about this before, but when we're talking about cash games, you kind of almost have to use those chalk plays. Kenneth Walker is about as chalky as it gets, but he's also a great option this week. I am also going to pair them with then the tight end from the Seattle Seahawks, AJ Barner at 4,000. This is the way, in my opinion. Now, like I said, if you want to play yourself, one of the Los Angeles Rams tight ends, I get it. But AJ Barner was kind of a one-man tight end wrecking crew this season versus the Rams. I know you were disappointed in him last week. 1 rush, 2 yards, and it hurt. It hurt way down in the cockles of your heart. I know that. But week 11 versus these same Rams, 10 catches on 11 targets for 70 yards. And oh, by the way, he also ran it a couple times. He was the tight end 4 that week. Week 16 versus these same Rams, 4 catches, 6 targets, 49 yards, and a touchdown, and another rush attempt for 15 DraftKings points. He was tight end 8, so he's got a couple of top 8 finishes on the season against this team here. 2 of his top 3 fantasy performances on the entire season came against these Rams. Last week, Colston Loveland, who has had a great end of the season and has had a good playoff run, had 4 catches for 56 yards against this same defense here. The Rams are tough, but pass catchers against the Rams are about the closest thing there is to a plus matchup left in fantasy outside of, like I said, tight end versus Seattle. I don't like the idea of having to guess which tight end is going to eat. Again, if I'm going to make the bet, it's Parkinson out of the 3 that they have. Parkinson, Terrence Ferguson, and Higbee, who shall not be named and who I don't rank out of principle. But I'm going to run with AJ Barner at 4,000, Kenneth Walker at 6,200. I already told you I'm running with Maye and Boutte. I've got my Mayday Bulldog here made with Shanky's Whip, Slangeva, everybody. I love the Puka play that you talked about and JSN. If you can fit them into your lineup, that's why we paid down for Boutte at 4,500. I am fitting them in my lineup as well. My other kind of, suggestions here. I think Denver's going to try to lean on the run as long as they possibly can. You can take that for what it's worth. I think that if you're going to try and pick a New England running back, but it's clear by now that at least for now, at the moment, Ramondre Stevenson is the running back to pick in New England. And if you're going to play you have to play defense. You could play the Rams defense, I guess, and it will save you $700, but I am going to pay up for that New England defense and take their chances against the backup quarterback in Denver, even though I still think that they have a chance to perform. There are worse plays than playing a very good defense in New England against a backup quarterback in a championship game. Slangeva, everybody, and good luck this week. Let's win some money.
Let's win some money indeed. I don't know if you guys know this, but half the country is going to be frozen over by Sunday or Monday.
We already are.
Let's heat it up. Let's heat it up.
Hot air. So hot in here.
All right. So we're getting into dynasty season. I'm super stoked to, this is my favorite time of year. I love the NFL draft. That's like outside of the Super Bowl. That's probably my next favorite event is the NFL draft. Next favorite week in the NFL season, potentially even. Love it. So I'm stoked we're getting into that time of year. And a big part of it is these exhibition games, the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. And what they can do is we can remove some of these players from the context of their teams and kind of isolate them as players with similar levels of competition around them. And we can kind of see what are you what we think we are based on your tape, or is there something else here? So what I want to go through, and I'm going to kick it to you guys, see, how much I know we're early in our process on a lot of these guys. So I'm just going to kick it to you guys, see what you have to say about some of these guys. But largely what I want to leave the listener with at the end of this is here's a watch list of the guys who could end up being fantasy relevant in the future. And of these guys, what are we looking for? So, for example, we'll start off with Concepcion from Texas A&M. He is someone who a lot of manufactured targets. Quick guy. He just transferred from up to Texas A&M this past season. This was his first season as Texas A&M. He had, I believe it was like North Carolina A&M. Dan, I don't know if you have that written down in front of you, but I want to say that's true. But regardless, small school. Came up from a small school, 2 years there, was productive. Comes up to Texas A&M, has the athleticism. There's no doubt about that. He is a smaller guy. What we need to see, are you a manufactured target gadget guy, or are you a real wide receiver? Can you go win in man against some of these corners, in an exhibition game? Can you go win at the line of scrimmage? I mean, you're a smaller guy. That's not necessarily the only pathway to victory for you to be an NFL prospect. But if you can, it sure makes I've seen some mocks that talk about him as a potential late first round type of guy. And that's a way for you to solidify yourself into that conversation, is if at your size, with your athleticism, with your quickness, you can also win at the line of scrimmage. Can catch the ball away from your hands, be a clean route runner, all of these things. So that's the type of thing that we're going to go ahead and talk about. So yeah, the KC Concepcion, I want to hear what you guys have to say. But yeah, I think creating separation down the field on outs, digs, slants, it just be more than just a screen and underneath check down merchant. So Dan, I'll kick it to you first. What do you think about Casey Concepcion, his potential to kind of break this mold, be more than just this archetype? Anything that you might have to add?
Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as what we're going to look for throughout this process with the Senior Bowl, right? But with Concepcion, I have very little doubt that he can pull this off. So he's actually, of the players we're going to talk about, he's probably the one I've watched the most tape on, because I've watched quite a bit of Texas A&M games to begin with. So I get to watch this guy play. He has the hips. He doesn't just have the straight line speed. He has the hips to get in and out of his breaks very, very quickly, which to me typically means a wide receiver who at least has the potential to become a very good route runner, or at least be able to learn the routes that he needs to get the separation that he needs to. If he winds up at any type of Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan, KOC type of system there, he's going to thrive. Because he's going to get to play that Z wide receiver, the flanker wide receiver. He's going to get to be the slot guy and have designed routes for him to be yards after the catch type of guy. He's not going to be the guy in the perimeter and the X wide receiver lining up and beating guys one-on-one all day long. That's not what his game is going to be. But because he is so versatile, explosive, I do believe, and it's a little early for comparisons, but this guy I did have a comparison for. I do believe he's a better version of Jaden Reed. I think he'd be a better receiver than Jaden Reed. He can be utilized in that versatile mode. He already was in Texas A&M. He's an excellent returner, so that'll automatically get him on the field already. And because teams are already talking about him being in the first round, that bodes very, very well for what a team is going to invest and what they're going to want to get out of him and utilize him in that faction. So I do believe he could be a better version of a Jaden Reed in his NFL career, especially if the draft capital matches what we're seeing right now, because he can do all those types of things.
Yeah. I think you can obviously, we can preclude all of our statements about all these guys with, okay, it depends on where he goes. He has to land in the right spot where they're going to actually use him the way he should be used. You could say that with every guy, every year, every round, regardless of the guy's capital. But he is great he's really good after the catch. He's a very good route runner if he can get off the line. I think that's your question here, Adam, is what we will want to watch this weekend against other guys who have NFL aspirations and have that kind of talent. Can you get off the line quick enough to actually use the talents that you have? I want to be able to see that. He runs a 4.46. He's like you said, Dan, he's a slot guy. He's going to play inside. He's not a perimeter type guy. I've actually seen him comped to our DFS play, Kayshon Boutte as well. Another guy that, runs those similar kinds of routes there. If he could be better than Jaden Reed, heck yes, sign me up for that all day long. I haven't watched, admittedly, as much tape of him as you have. I see him as a little bit more of a round 2 or day 2 guy. But a little note for everybody out there, by the way, if you are not familiar with KC Concepcion and you try to Google this dude, remember, it's the receiver from Texas A&M. This is not the 40-year-old Filipino actress who has PCOS, okay, polycystic ovary syndrome. It's not her. Beautiful woman. She does not play slot receiver, and she's not eligible for the draft this year. You're looking up the guy from Texas A&M, the junior from the Aggies there. But no, I agree with you. I love everything this guy can do with the ball in his hands and route running, similar to the way that I kind of fell in love with Luther Burden in the draft process last year. I really hope that he can go somewhere, like you said, Dan, that is going to use him that way, because if so, hey, I mean, sky might be the limit for the little guy.
Yeah, for sure.
He's not even that little compared to some of the small receivers.
No,
that's true too. That's true. I mean, I say little
he's
guy
small by like what we
too.
think of like prototypical NFL wide receiver,
yes.
but yeah, he's
not fine for a slot. His size is fine for slot.
This isn't Tank Dell. This isn't one of those guys.
Yeah.
Complete opposite end of the spectrum, by the way. Let's move on to our next player, and certainly a guy who I think we've all gotten like taste of, even if you haven't watched much so far this season, because USC is a team that we end up watching for this one way or the other every season. There's always someone that we're at least like have to do our due diligence. There always is, on that USC offense. And this year, Jacoby Lane is one of those guys. I think the big trait that you're going to talk about with him is the size. So again, opposite of KC Concepcion there. This is a guy, he's lanky for sure. I'm curious when we get into, sometimes we can get some good measurables out of these exhibition games as well. Curious what he weighs in at. I have him listed as 200, but numbers are kind of always iffy, preseason, but 6'4", 200. Again, I'd like to see him a little bit heavier than that. But someone who can definitely box out corners, strong at the catch point, I think has really good body control relative to his size. And what I'm looking for is the difference between, are you Jaden Higgins or are you Keon Coleman? Are you someone who your highlights are awesome and you can go up above guys and catch the ball and that's great, but can you move? Can you get clean releases? Can you run routes down the field cleanly? Can you get separation? Because those are things that I think are true of Jaden Higgins, and he's had I think a pretty solidly successful rookie season, but Keon Coleman at the pro level has struggled with. So that's kind of where I'm at with Jacoby Lane. Just the fundamentals of being a receiver. We know that, candidly, you can be a little loose with some of these things at USC. He has the traits to be a receiver that is really, really interesting in this draft. But what are you outside of that offense? He's been successful the past 2 seasons. This is, I believe, actually a true junior. Has only been there 3 seasons. Freshman wasn't much, but these last 2 years he's been involved. Someone who's interesting. What do you got, Dan?
Well, I'll start off. I mean, this is a day 2 guy for me, but yeah, I 6'4". I wish he was a little bit heavier, like you said. But the things that I like about Jacoby Lane is I think he's a very good route runner. I like watching the way that he runs his routes. I think that he separates well that way. And I think that he's very good contesting the catch. And both of those things bode well for him because he is not a guy that's going to separate with his speed. He's not going to find himself yards open because he's just blowing guys off the line or because he's blowing them off the ball downfield. He is an X guy's outside guy, 6'4". You can't teach that. I wish you could because I'm 5'5", but this is a guy that I'm really interested to see if he goes somewhere where they need that kind of guy that they can throw to the outside and just kind of throw it up and hope. I think he can really be that. He could really turn into something from a fantasy perspective. Because again, we're always coming at this from a fantasy angle. That's what we're talking about. That's what we care about dynasty wise. I think if he goes somewhere that needs an X, he could contribute even right away. I wish he was a little bit heavier and maybe they can build him up a little bit in the NFL, but if he can add any kind of size or weight behind that 6'4" frame, he already contests the catch well, and he already runs routes well. It's all kind of right there in front of him to possibly explode. It'll be a really interesting time to watch him here these next couple weekends and see how he performs in this arena.
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. So the issue that you have with these 6'4" wide receivers, no matter who they are, you're going to ask yourself, can you guys get separation? And we're not talking about the same kind of separation that you would with a Concepcion type, who's faster, going to play more in the middle. They're going to have more separation just naturally because of where they line up on the field and they're off the ball. But can you give the quarterback a passing lane? Do you have enough shift in your hips when you make those breaks in order to give him that lane that he needs to be able to throw that ball in there? That's going to be the question. I do think Lane does have that, but he's going to be that type of guy that I'm looking for. Like, look, I got to see what you run in the combine to know what you're really going to be. Maybe he's day 2. Maybe he's early day 3. I think there's still a wide volatility to his draft capacity right now, depending upon how he tests out, how he performs here. Because right now, when I look at Jacoby Lane, I see a guy who's an ex wide receiver, but could be one of these X wide receivers that we see just naturally get phased out of the game plan, where they're just like, you're there, run the treadmill, there for a few jump balls in the red zone. I think it'll definitely be good for that. But are you really much else? Are you really just there to set it up for everybody else, to be a blocker in the run game? If he can show the separation that he needs to show to in this situation, run a decent 40, I think we'll be talking about Jacoby Lane in a much different light. But right now, I think there's a wide volatility of where a guy like this could go.
Yeah, 100%. He's one of the guys who I think the combine as well is going to be really, really impactful for, like, what
right
the difference between a 4.55 and a 4.65 is, like, for when you talk about guys this size, like, that's a really big deal. And as well as the weight and how he can move, things of that nature. Moving on to another guy who I think probably really similar, by the way, is Elijah Surratt out of Indiana. Great week for him. Clap it up for Elijah Surratt. Good job. But it's similar in the way that I think he's good at the catch point. I think he's someone who we've seen have success down the field. It can be a physical receiver. He's followed, first of all, he's followed Signetti for a while now. He was at James Madison as a sophomore and then has been in Indiana the last 2 years.
Apparently really that's a good plan, though. If you're going to follow somebody, following Curt Signetti is apparently the way to go in college football.
But the first thing we have to talk about is obviously being a good receiver, independent of a coach who you've now followed around. And I think the second thing and the big one is this is a guy who has been not explosive in like the way of KC Concepcion, but explosive, like makes explosive plays, like, long plays down the field. But can you physically do that at the NFL level? Because this is a guy who I don't see as especially fast, and I don't think that the foot speed is necessarily that great. It just, generally speaking, he's not someone who the route tree is super developed for right now. So he's someone who, with the strong arms, and I think there are some traits to like, or the strong hands, excuse me. There are traits to like here. And I think he can be a good receiver at the next level, but it's probably a case where you're transitioning from being someone who is moving down the field as much as he has been and is becoming more of a true possession wide receiver, which is going to require expanding your route tree. So is that something you're capable of? Can you be more nuanced here outside of, I mean, you've been in the same offensive system functionally for 3 years. So, is this a symptom of the system, or is this a you thing? Which is always interesting to see with guys who haven't moved around much, especially candidly. Well, I think as a draft evaluator, one of the things that has been kind of a positive with how the transfer portal has been is you do typically get to see guys in a lot of different systems now, which it can be a negative towards development, but can be a positive because you can see different versions of things. And sometimes when a guy spent 4 years in the past at one system, there'd be the things where it's like, all right, but can you not do that thing, or you're just not being asked to do that thing? And this is a case with Surratt that we don't see as much as we used to. But anyways, Dan, kick it off with Surratt. What do you think?
Yeah, so it's a guy that I think I ultimately see as a limited skill set. I definitely think he's getting drafted day 3, first and foremost. Now, what he does have going for him is that he graded out excellent versus man coverage. And if he can take that into the Senior Bowl against some of these other corners who are going to be going day 1, day 2, and show that he can still successfully beat them in man coverage too, that's something teams really, really value. Hitting that back shoulder throw is very much a skill set in the NFL. I don't believe that he is dynamic enough to ever be in a high target volume type of role, but could he be kind of that backside guy as a wide receiver 3? I think he has the potential for that, but I do believe ultimately that would be his ceiling. It's just, he doesn't project well out to be a high target guy. He's not, like you guys said, he's not particularly fast. He's not particularly big. He'll do a lot of the dirty stuff. I kind of look at him like, maybe he's a more perimeter-ish version of Luke McCaffrey, who we haven't seen a ton out of. Like, he seems to do all the little dirty things that you want him to do the right way, but he just doesn't really have the skill set to make it pop on the NFL level on a week in, week out basis.
No, I agree. I mean, he runs a 4.6 right now is what is in his profile here. I seen him comp to Trey Harris, but I'm like, I don't see that. Harris is quicker to me, faster than that. I like Surratt's hands. I like his body control. I think that he's good that way. But even as an X guy, I see him as much more of a possession type guy in the NFL. I think he's going to have to be that kind of guy. I don't see him with that 4.6 speed at the X position. I don't see him as the kind of guy that's going to make a lot of those big explosive plays in the NFL. So I agree with you, Dan. I don't see him as a guy that's going to earn himself a ton of targets that way. I think he can be a possession type guy, but he's not a guy that necessarily excites me coming into the draft. And he's not a guy that I will be targeting, at least at this point. I'm not going to be looking at him in my rookie drafts as somebody that I'm really hoping falls to me, depending on, again, with the caveat always of where he lands and what they need.
Well, and these things can always change as we watch more film, through the process. And as much as we talk about the combine doesn't make or break prospects, we definitely, we'll go relook things. If Surratt goes and runs a 4.5 or 4.47, changes the math a little bit.
and there are always guys every year. There are guys who emerge from the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl type games as having impressed people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And really that's why raise their own stock.
It clarifies the picture 100%.
Surratt strikes me as one of those guys who, he
needs
really stand to help himself this weekend.
Yes, 100%.
Based on his skill set, what he shows this weekend could really raise him in scouts. And then, yes, the combine will be a big deal for him.
We'll stay local. We're not going to drive this boat too far from Elijah Surratt. We're going to go head on over to Malachi Fields, going from Bloomington to South Bend.
Notre Dame homer.
Hey, it's on the list. Got to talk about him. And he is much the same as these other guys, to be honest with you. It's a lot of the same outside of Concepcion that we have to deal with right now. A guy who the traits, we've had one trait off for a lot of these big bodied guys. And I think he's got all of them. He has the weight you want to see for his size. He is 6'4". I think the long speed is there. It's not a Surratt thing where the long speed's not there. Those things, good. Where it breaks down is the production, I don't want to say has been bad because it hasn't been, especially at Virginia. I think it was a little underwhelming. Well, Notre Dame especially, but on the whole, I think it's just been a touch underwhelming. Not bad, but just not as much as you'd want to see. And I think where we're really going to have concerns with him, again, is can you move laterally? He's someone who the long speed works, but when he tries to turn, he loses all of it. And can you get back up to speed quickly enough? Because otherwise, you're going to be, we talked about someone who's just getting phased out of the offense and running sprints down the field. That's a real world for Malachi Fields if he can manage to stay on the field in the first place, candidly, because I think he is someone who's strong at the catch point. I think he is someone who has the long speed. I think he is someone who, I brought up his name once today already. I guess the whole Brandon Bean interview thing and the owner just has him in my brain. But much like Keon Coleman, like the one thing you have to give both of these guys is that for being someone who like the lateral quickness you're maybe not super thrilled about, they turn into real tough runners after the catch for these big body guys, which is something I did like about Keon Coleman and definitely like about Malachi Fields. But again, if you have no real route tree, if there is no nuance to your game, how consistently can you be involved in an offense at the NFL level? And I think that's going to be the question for him. Just can you move, or are you just too stiff in the hips?
After his measurables, 6'4", 223 and 450 in the 4. Like you said, I like those traits, but my very next note for him was the Keon Coleman comp. Yeah. Are you going to be that? And we can take all of the drama from the interview aside, but nobody on this panel was a big Keon Coleman guy in the draft process. I think that a lot of us saw what his limitations were going to be in the NFL, but the thing about Fields, I mean, he's an ex-quarterback. He's smart on the field and he's intelligent. He's an intelligent player that way. He's good at contesting catches, but he's not overly physical still. And he's not overly quick or fast that way. Like you said, I mean, once he tries to turn the corner, that all goes away. So yeah. Can you translate the success you had at college to the NFL level where everybody you're going to face in the NFL is the best guy you faced in college? Can you take what you did in college and move it on to the next level? I'm a little worried about that. He's a day 3 type guy for me, a mid to late day 3 type guy for my standing right now. But yeah, I mean, the traits are there, but
So for me, this is a guy that outside of Concepcion, the players that we talked about so far, I do believe Malachi Fields has the most upside. Now, Jacoby Lane might be more polished, and therefore he might go a little bit higher, but I think Malachi Fields isn't going to be too far off as far as a late day 2, early day 3 type of pick. Unlike Surratt, Malachi Fields has an NFL body with an NFL skill set. The question I think becomes, and this is kind of interesting, is he more Michael Wilson or is he more Gabe Davis? And there was a time that we were really excited about Gabe Davis too. But with Michael Wilson, you can even make the argument like, look, outside of a little late run here this past season, what else has he done? My point so more being is that because he has that physicality play to him where he will go up, he'll catch the ball. He has enough NFL elite speed and yards after the catch because he's hard to bring down. If you're willing to feature that type of player in your offense, which is more rare, by the way, that we are getting offenses that are willing to feature their X wide receiver. It used to always be the X wide receiver. Now it's not. But if you're willing to do that, he can give you something, I think, similar to what a Michael Wilson gave you. I think he's a very similar type of player in that sense. If you don't, that's where he becomes Gabe Davis. Where like you can see the skill set, we'll probably have a couple pop games with some touchdowns, but never actually get consistently enough involved in the offense to make it matter, right? So Malachi Fields very much falls into that category for me. Literally have him as a boomer bust wide receiver 3 type as his fantasy projection from his from his college profile.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate way of putting it. Well, unfortunately, we have to leave the great state of Indiana, but a former resident, Tanner Koziol, 3 years at Ball State. So we're hanging on by a thread in this little Indiana run we've got here. But Houston now this past season, and probably the most relevant tight end that we have to talk about today. There's some other options we'll have a little bit later. But one of the guys who I think is the most interesting, especially from a fantasy aspect. So Tanner Koziol let's start off with like the elephant in the room. Dude's 6'7" and probably on the upper end of it. He's someone who I don't think we're exaggerating the height on. And I think he's a solid athlete for the tight end position as well. He's someone who's been productive as a receiver, like really productive. As a matter of fact, I believe he actually had 94 receptions his last year at Ball State, 74 this last season at Houston. So someone who has gotten real volume in the college level. Now, granted, not at the biggest schools of all time between Houston and Ball State, but nonetheless has been super, super productive. Now, obviously, with that 6'7" height, he has been a pretty solid red zone guy with, he's had 14 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, 24 over his 4 years in college. Pretty freaking solid, I would say. It definitely shows it on film that he is someone who can box guys out, is definitely a hands catcher. You can see that. There are some ways in which he is clunky with his bodies, but I don't think it's as a receiver. Now, where he is clunky with his body, and it is going to hurt his NFL stock value, but not necessarily for fantasy, but stock value, and his ability to get on the field is as a blocker. He has been someone who, when you watch him as a blocker, and I think his blocking reps are going to be really important for his draft stock. And as you guys all know, draft stock correlates pretty heavily with fantasy points. So it's kind of that roundabout way where this is important for us is he needs to be able to block, especially get to the second level and maintain blocks. He was super hit or miss in college. And if I'm being honest, I think that the hits are because he can out-athlete some folks at the level of college football that he was playing at. I think he is just a little bit clunky in his blocking, to be honest with you. So if that's something that he can get worked on, candidly, it's going to be tough because while the height is awesome, the athleticism is awesome. He's 6'7", 240. So he's a lanky dude. It's never going to be perfect. You're never going to expect him to be a traditional inline tight end. But you don't want him to be a purely gadget, purely slot guy. You want him to be someone who can, have reliable snaps if you're drafting him in dynasty or for fantasy purposes in general. So, anyway, what do you guys think about Tanner Koziol, who, if nothing else, in a tight end class that outside of Sadiq is not much, he's an interesting guy to talk about, an interesting guy to watch.
Well, he was almost a Badger. He was almost a Badger. I'm not going to hold it against him. I'm not going to hold it against him that he transferred there and then pulled the rug out from under us.
So do you claim him because he's almost a Badger, just like you claim some other guys who were like Badger 5 years ago?
I don't claim him as a Badger, but what I will say is that Badger tight ends generally work out pretty well in the NFL and have long careers and nice careers in the NFL at the tight end position. And if they wanted him, he's got to have something, right? So, I mean, that joke aside, yeah, I mean, I have him comped to Jared Wiley,
you're claiming
who I liked last season in the draft process as well. But again, the same kinds of questions that came up then came up now. Like you said, Adam, he's hit or miss as a blocker. The hits are nice hits, but they're a little few and far between compared to the misses. So can he, improve himself that way enough to get himself on the field? Because as a receiver, I have no doubt that his receiver reps in the NFL will be just fine, but you have to be able to get yourself on the field and at the tight end position, especially depending on the offense he falls to. If you want to find yourself on the field, you have to be able to block as a tight end. And that is a big question with him. He's got nice hands. He's not the best route runner. He's not overly explosive, but I mean, yeah, you can't teach 6'7". You can't teach that kind of height anywhere on the field, but can you block enough? Dan, what's your thoughts on him?
Well, if he plays his cards right, he could be the second tight end drafted in this draft. Because when you guys laid it out, when you look at that frame and look at how productive he was. Now, what's funny about his production is that between Ball State and Houston, you got two colleges that are known for just over-targeting a tight end, especially when they have a half-decent one, but known for amplifying production to tight ends in particular at those colleges, but not always, not warranted as far as that goes, too. This is a guy who's going to come in day one, be excellent in the red zone. When he's 6'7", 240, he has room on his frame to girth out even a little bit more. So I would not surprise me. This guy gets to the NFL, year one, year two, winds up bulking up, and he's about 250. And with blocking, when you're that big, I just need you to be willing to block because I can teach you the technique. You just got to be willing to do so. Nothing on his tape tells me that he's not willing to block. So as long as that's the case, I do think that's an element of his game that will develop. This is somebody who you want to keep your eye on. Maybe in your rookie drafts, he winds up being available second, third round, and you want to take a shot that we know tight ends sometimes take 3 to 4 years to develop. He falls into that category, but he's somebody when he pops, he could pop big time as a touchdown getter.
You know who I said that about last year? Theo Johnson. Was not a great blocker, but was a willing blocker. And again, is 6'12", and in the red zone, I said, I think he can be an immediate target, an immediate threat. Maybe Koziol turns into that kind of guy because he is willing to at least try. And if he's willing to work on the craft and he goes somewhere that can teach him up a little bit in that blocking, hey, here we go.
Yeah, 100%. Justin Joly, our next guy, another guy who has kind of transferred around a little bit from UConn to NC State. This is a guy who, say, also has been fairly productive, especially for the tight end position. He's got 2 years above 500 yards, and this past season was like just shy of it at 489. He's an interesting one. He's also a receiving tight end, so someone who, you know, if you like him, then we are talking about a fantasy relevant guy. This isn't a blocking tight end or anything like that. But it's really interesting. So productivity is good. I think I like him at the catch point. I actually think that of a lot of the guys we're going to talk about in this class, he's one of the best. He has some of the best hips. And he is, I think, a smooth mover. You know, there's things going for him. What the problem is going to be is I'm really concerned about the vertical athleticism for him, about his long speed. This is also a guy who, by the way, he's 6'3", 250. So you're not outsizing guys. So if you're also not outspeeding guys, okay, it's great that you can run routes and it's great that you can catch, but are you an NFL athlete? And you're also, by the way, not particularly good at an NFL, like inline tight end as a blocker. And whereas with Koziol, I'm willing to be nice and project that with your frame that you can improve there. I don't see that world for Joly, candidly. So I need to see you here at your bowl game. And hold on, let me double check. Yeah, Senior Bowl. I need you to dominate as a receiver, and I need you to not only dominate, but I need you to continue to separate against this level of talent. I need you to be someone who, whether you're running away from guys with your speed or whether your quickness is just so much so that you can just actually, like, that is your calling card and you can get away from guys that way. Like, I need to see it against schools that aren't in the ACC or aren't on the UConn schedule. Because right now I'm really concerned that you just don't have it in you as an NFL athlete, that, you know, some of the intangible stuff and the traits are nice. But, you know, just physically it's not there. So I'm curious what you guys have to think.
Well, first of all, Joly. I just had to get that one off my chest on that one. But so first, I do want to say this. Tight ends who are 6'3", 250, we have to get a new age of thought, because that is kind of the average size of a tight end now, especially for an inline blocker. And he was not horrible blocking grade wise. He's actually one of the higher ones as far as grading goes. And you could take that for what it is off of PFF. But I do remember having this argument with a lot of people last year about Fannin and why I had Fannin so high up my board. And a lot of people said I was crazy because he didn't have the vertical speed. He didn't have the ability to block. I'm like, he blocks pretty well, just as well as Tyler Warren did, or especially better than Colson Loveland ever did. And I was like, this guy just gets open. Now, I don't think Joly has the hips and the quickness that Fannin does. Don't get me twisted here with that at any stretch of the means. But I do think this is a guy who is a depth piece in tight end. Fantasy wise, though, I don't see a ton here. I see a guy who can probably be a third string tight end for most leagues. Maybe he could turn into a Tyler Higbee type, but that would be his absolute ceiling. And that's only a flash in the pan type of thing anyway. So I don't see him being truly fantasy relevant given the limitations that he has his overall athletic skill set and being able to play that often.
Yep. No, I worry about him, and it pains me to say this again, as a little dude who played football, but he's got an NFL heart in a UFL body. Unfortunately, he's too small. He's the slot kind of guy. I don't think he can play in line. He tries hard blocking. He's got decent technique, but that size is going to hurt him when he's facing NFL size athletes there. He's tough. He wins at the catch point, even though he is a little bit smaller, but he's not fast enough to be that full-time, like move type tight end. Like we said, I think that in his wildest dreams, he would hope to be something similar to Harold Fannin, but I agree with you that he's just not the athlete. He doesn't have the fluidity that Harold Fannin did, and that we all liked coming into the draft last year with Fannin. We all thought that Fannin had what it took to be an athlete, at least at this level. I have doubts about Joe Lee at this level, even though he's like I said, willing guy, smart guy. He has the NFL heart, but it's a UFL body.
All right. So all right. Good news, bad news. We're going to have one more conversation here, but to make up for it being one last conversation, I'm going to give you guys a double. We're going to have a double album right here. my Penn State running back duo here.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to be what it was.
Yep. We're going to give you the full duo. I feel like talking about one without the other is blasphemy. You can't do it. Right. We're going to talk both. So Kayshon Allen and Nick Singleton, who, by the way, Penn State was really disappointing this season. I think that there's a lot of disappointment about both of these guys, because I think for both of them, we were hoping that they were going to show some development in their game. But like on a college level, we have to talk about how awesome it is to have both of them. Not from just like a pure talent perspective, because they actually complement each other amazingly. You could just move them up and it's fine. Like they actually complement each other.
This is the textbook really definition of the thunder and lightning. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
So we'll start the conversation. We'll go through both. I want your thoughts of both, but we'll start with Kayshon Allen, who is a guy, successful runner, I would say, is the first thing. He's someone who profiles definitely as a power back, which can be good and bad. He's definitely someone who you can envision having a real workload. He's had 2,000-yard seasons at the collegiate level. He's had this past season, he was over 6 yards per carry. He has just shy of 40 rushing touchdowns in college. He's been playing significant downs at Penn State since he was a freshman. I mean, really solid in that regards. But what we need to see to be really excited, because I think he's someone who's going to get carries in the NFL. I got the body for it. He's 220 and has some good size to him. But I either need to see that you can make explosive runs outside of Penn State. Like, are you an explosive runner? Or B, can you show me something in the passing game? Either way works. I'm actually cool either way. I don't think I need to see both. I just can you show me some quickness? Can you show me some juice? Can you show me that you were not a guy who, okay, great, if you go late and you're just this powerful runner, like I think you can be a Manun guy or a David Montgomery or that type of thing, which is great. Like, again, I like him, but can you be more than that? Can you be a 1A? And that's what we need to see about him. And those are the things, I think, whether it's in the receiving game or whether it's just a little bit more quickness, a little bit more juice. Those are the things that we need to see with him. And then with Singleton, we've got a guy who electric athlete, dude can zoom. But he has not been the runner that I think we would hope that we know he can be, candidly. I mean, he is someone who has the size. Like, this isn't a situation where, oh, you're just so fast, but it's because you're undersized. Like, no, he's 6 foot 224. So for you to not be the runner that can do things inside and outside, that you're just a guy who is an explosive receiver. He was a 4.5 yards per carry, just for context, a rusher this past season. He has 2,000-yard seasons as a runner. They were his freshman season and last season. But as he's been successful in the red zone, he's been successful as a receiver. As a junior, he had 41 receptions, for example. There are a lot of things to like as a dynamic playmaker, but can you, at the next level, are you a between the tackles runner? Are you a consistent runner? Are you someone who's going to be on the field for more than just passing downs? And to add on to that, on passing downs, you have the frame to do it. Again, it's just like running. You have the frame to do it, but are you going to be the pass blocker that you need to be to stay on the field for third downs? Like those are the things that I need to see out of you, because the athleticism, he's a natural receiver, which it's so bizarre because you don't always get that at his size, but he is the athlete. He is at his size. He's a natural receiver. And the thing that you'd probably take for granted at 6 foot 224, he doesn't have. If you develop that one thing, you are genuinely someone who can be a workhorse back, but you've now had 4 seasons at a big time school where you haven't shown it. So you've got this exhibition game to maybe show something a little bit different, but otherwise I think you are someone who will be pigeonholed into being a back who is just coveted for his explosiveness, but not necessarily a whole lot else. And again, natural receiving ability, which I do think he also has.
I want to lay my take out here, and then Dan, I'm really interested to hear your take between the two of these guys. Between the two of them, fantasy wise and NFL role wise, I see Kayshon Allen having the better path to an NFL and fantasy relevant role. His nickname's Fat Man, and he embraces it, and I love that. But I think I like his patience. I think he's powerful. He's got good vision. He's not the breakaway threat. He's not going to be the third down guy, but I think he can find himself in a goal line type role. I like the fact that you brought up like Monungai, and I did not like Monungai coming into last year's draft.
Told you.
Okay. But he's not a guy that's fast. He's not a guy that's necessarily exceptionally explosive, but he went to a place where they fit him into a role, and he fits that role perfect. And he does exactly what they want him to do. And I think that between the two of these guys, Kayshon Allen's skill set and physical traits lend himself to finding that kind of a role. Nick Singleton is 8.5 feet tall, and that's great. And he runs really fast, but I don't see him being very shifty. I don't think that he's got, and I don't like his vision when I watch Nick Singleton play. So if you don't have great vision and you're not shifty, you're not making guys miss, what I'm left with is you're tall and you're fast. I don't think that necessarily translates to the NFL in terms of being able to find yourself in any kind of fantasy relevant role. He's lightning. He runs fast and he runs angry. He's quick. He's got good burst, but without that lateral movement, without that kind of, ability to make guys miss, I don't see as much of a role for Singleton as I do for a guy like Kayshon Allen, who I think can come in and be that kind of goal line, short down, short yardage. And if he finds the right spot, he can be that Monungai type. I like Kayshon Allen better from an NFL and a fantasy standpoint that way. But Dan, what's your take on these two guys? I'm literally hanging by a thread here.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you first and foremost. The majority of the fantasy expert community is going to tell you Nicholas Singleton's the guy to go with between these two. The most of them are going to say Singleton has that upside because he has the body size, because he already has the receiving profile, that if the rest of it even hits on a competent level, he could explode, which, by the way, would be true. Except for Chase, I do agree with you. I don't like his vision. The biggest problem that I have is the guy doesn't finish runs. 2.69 yards after contact. Pathetic for any type of running back in college football, but especially for a guy with his type of size. Kayshon Allen, to me, the whole time has been the more NFL ready profile type of running back. You worry about his explosiveness. He had 17 15-plus yard carries. That was 21st amongst eligible running backs for that stat this past year. Because he has the vision, because he has the physicality, he can fit in any system. It's just a very particular type of role. Now, is he a true RB1 overall? I don't know. He would have to be the bell cow on the ground. Nobody else could take away ground. It would have to be he's paired up with a third down specialist, and that's it. And he's getting all the carries in the world in between. It would have to be that type of level. I think he could do it because I think he is a double-digit touchdown type of profile type of running back, but he's got to get that kind of a volume to do it. And he's not going to have the receiving, in my opinion, to fall back on. The one thing that's sad, it's not that I think he can't do it, but the one thing that is definitely sad that has played itself out over the last couple of years is that once you get pigeonholed in college, you stay pigeonholed in the NFL. Right or wrong, it does not matter. So Kayshon Allen is not somebody I think who's going to suddenly expand his wings when he gets into the NFL as far as the receiving threat goes. So it's going to take a specific coach. It's going to take a gap scheme system in the first place. He's not a zone runner guy. It's going to have to be a power gap scheme system too. So we're eliminating teams right off the rip, right? We got to see where he winds up at. And that's where Nicholas Singleton is interesting, because there's not a scheme in which I could say, well, you can't do that. You can't play in that. He's going to be more versatile as far as where he winds up. Like, his value, his profile value will stay the same no matter who drafts him. It's all going to be about, can you become a competent runner? Plain and simple. Kayshon Allen is, you got to fall in the right location. So that kind of plays back and forth with one another as you go through this pre-draft process. But just looking at it on the table, I look at Kayshon Allen. That's the guy I would prefer to have with a bigger fantasy upside, because I think he's the type of guy who's going to go 1,200 yards rushing, get double-digit touchdowns, where Singleton is the type of guy, to me, flails out in the NFL in about 3 years. We get real excited about him, like Antonio Gibson. We got real excited about Antonio Gibson. We did have a great year at Antonio Gibson, and then nowhere to be found fantasy relevancy after that, because he doesn't have great vision. He runs too high. I see a lot of that in Singleton.
Hey, is this the Penn State version? The second coming of like Darren McFadden, Felix Jones out of Arkansas a long time ago. I know that 90% of our listeners who are under the age of 25, won't have any idea who those dudes are, because that was from your childhood. But Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, another Thunder and Lightning duo who were awesome in college.
I can't go that far old, because those were 2 first rounders. Like, it was a little different.
Ultimately flamed out.
I mean, we had multiple good seasons out of McFadden and 2 good seasons out of Felix.
Good, but not first round awesome. Like, oh, I'm so glad I took him in Dynasty.
Sure. But neither one of these guys are going to go that high. So I wouldn't go to that point. Maybe the poor man version of
That's a good point.
The Notre Dame guys.
That's you make a great point, that because neither of these guys are necessarily going to go that high.
Yeah.
And it's a different world now. I mean, back when those guys were taken, running back was a much more important. Yes.
The Notre Dame guys, on the other hand, Love's definitely going in the first round. Jarian Price, second round probably, but could make the argument he's the second running back taken off.
Yes, and Adam.
We will have that conversation eventually. I'm ready for it.
I have no doubt that you would be. So, Adam, is it safe to say we'll pick up where we left off next week?
That is safe to say that, absolutely.
So next week, and we'll have to talk about this a little bit as a show, guys, but like next week, we'll be in between the Super Bowl. So we won't have DFS to necessarily talk about. So we might be full blown talking, Senior Bowl and other
Shrine Bowl outcomes and some of these Senior Bowl guys still.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll be diving in. It'll be like kind of like full, almost off-season mode 1 week before the Super Bowl, and then we'll get right back into our DFS and Super Bowl time and all that good stuff. But make sure you're downloading Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you're checking out our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. And guys, we'll see you real soon.